Hi everyone, Links, Mr. Bronze Connoisseur here, and today I'd like to try a slightly more educational style videos. Now, I still have a couple of videos where with potential smurfs and cheaters to look at, and they are a lot of fun, but I've been complaining about how Overwatch does a poor job at explaining its own mechanics and its own concepts to us for a very long time, and I think this is the first time I actually found a really good game to talk about something like that. And today I want to talk about the fundamentals of grouping up. So this is a game I played on Samoa, a new map, which I think is using a new map philosophy, and it is actually making a problem that we're facing here in bronze and to gold a lot worse. And I think this is why they're thinking of implementing the spawning together mechanic, because the problem that occurred in this game is going to keep happening more if they keep making smaller maps like this going forward. And I think they will, because it's a lot more fun, and I think they they agree. It's not really my place to tell whether they agree or not, but with this map I had a feeling when we were playing it that something was off. Going back in the replay, I actually found out very quickly what it was, and I'd like to ignore the mechanical side of things for this video, because while mechanics are important, there's other fundamental things that we need to do to play this game well, and the game doesn't really tell us this. Now, it does try to guide us, but it doesn't do a very good job. Now, I'd like to start by saying that normally whenever we leave spawn, we don't have to think about the concept of grouping up. We are forced by the game to group up, and we're made to be impatient in spawn while we wait for the doors to open, and we all leave at the same time. Now, barring mobility of each character being different, and as well as any mobility abilities, more or less everybody's grouped together, and that's a good thing going forward. We want to maximize going to the point, and we're made to want to do that as quickly as possible. But because they didn't leave the spawn at the same time, and this map has a much more dynamic layout that should make games a bit shorter, um, this actually caused problems straight on.
One. Round one. Capture
So
the
we're not
objective.
going to be looking at our side. That's on purpose, because I think the main action can be seen from top down mostly. Unfortunately, I feel that aside from being really bad at explaining itself, Overwatch has a problem where being in first person perspective limits the amount of information we have available at one time. But if we go into the replay, which thankfully we can do now, there was a time in Overwatch where we didn't have a replay feature, and our own recorded footage was literally the only thing we had. That time is over now, so we can actually look from above and use some game theory like space, positioning, and we're going to try to look at why their push failed so quickly and why they never recovered. And obviously, starting already here, we can already tell that things are not looking great. Our team is already approaching on the point as a group, with of course Sombra, who is allowed to roam around and is expected to, going a bit more forward. Now, this isn't quite bad yet, but what I didn't know at the time was that they had two people either AFK or typing. This is actually really bad, and they should be trying to wait before going in. Finally, we have some movement, but again, it's not enough. And here comes one of the first problems that I think we can look at from a positioning standpoint, where we can already tell that if this is not good positioning and good formation for this team. Now, this team would have already been at a disadvantage going straight out the gate because they didn't group up, but now the tank looks like they're not even waiting to engage. Now, I'd like to point as well that this is one of the reasons Sombra is going to continue being very strong going forward, since assuming, of course, that she actually gets the kills, um, a good Sombra is going to exacerbate the problem that they've not grouped up, therefore they've made themselves vulnerable to being attacked. Now, if we want to take space into consideration, we see that they should have grouped up around one of these corners first before engaging. We were very lucky. We actually made it to the point before them and therefore could cover a little bit more than half of the map's terrain before engaging with them. And here we have, unfortunately, the tank already engaging with only one support's worth of teammates around. And obviously, if we just ignore mechanics and assume a 50-50 split on resources from both sides, there is no way that they stand a chance in a 50-50 scenario of winning this. Unfortunately, they do in hard engage here and they cannot break off, and Sombra
The
gets a pick.
objective is now active.
Now, this is important because we have just lost one person in base who will now have to respawn. This would be the perfect time for them to realize that they have to move back, but unfortunately they've already dedicated time and space, and the tank unfortunately dies. Now this is where I was thinking this is a bit odd, and then we get to this point here, which is where we reach the point of a pincer, and a pincer is a basically attack from two sides where the enemy have to divide their attention. Now Moira would be safe to disengage via this building here and away. She'd still have to contest with the Sombra at one point, but from a from a bird's eye view, we can see that this was a bad idea. And from here on out, the staggering begins and it doesn't end. And I think this is why they want to implement a respawn together mechanic. Now there's still stuff going on here. They're still typing and chatting away. They're leaving spawn, and while some of them have now regrouped, if we look at it here, we are about to gather on this corner here because we know they're going to be coming down here, and there's a very good chance that we will have the upper hand because uh, only one person is directly available at one time here, and if we're lucky, the Sombra will come around again. But at the moment, things are not looking too bad. Sombra engages here, which essentially forces them to start and take the fight here, and then moves out of their danger zone away. And this again, given no mechanical skills at all, just talking about a 50-50 split of attacks going back and forth, they now have to contest on two sides of this wall here, and they're also engaging on a 3v4 directly with another person here, and obviously two people are still respawning. So this isn't looking very good. Now another person joins the fight, but very quickly a death happens, and again, this is a moment where, ignoring Sombra, it's an even split 4v4 in terms of players, but they've already lost a player, and this is really the part where they should be backing off. But unfortunately, it's very hard to see that when you're in first person perspective, but once again they're being attacked from two sides, making it really hard for them to split their attention. And again, from purely 50-50 resources, they were always going to have a hard time. And now the Zenyatta does what we've all done. I've done it, I'm sure you have done it, we've all done it. He was on his way to help his buddy, so he is dedicated to helping his buddy. And now the Stagger Fest is on. One by one, they get taken out because now nobody's grouping up anymore. Everybody's going, leaving one by one. The Sombra is getting the picks, and the tank going in essentially 1v5 here. And unfortunately, this is exacerbated by the fact that this is bronze, so we're all mechanically less able, but we also don't get to see this during the game, and I think that is a big problem. We don't get to see that this is a very strong position for our group to be in, and that they're constantly going in one by one. Now you can see it from your perspective. You know, you have a person in front of you, somebody's running behind you, but it is very difficult to really see that even just from a positioning standpoint, they didn't have it at full potential straight out the gate, and we did. And I think that, more than mechanical skill, was actually the thing that made the biggest difference. And at no point did that change. They tried to group, and I think at the most they've ever grouped up together, leaving spawn, was three at a time. We were more or less always as a clumped up group of people who are close enough to help each other, but at least distinctly separate enough so that we were never in too much of a clumped group to shoot at. Regardless, though, my point being that this may be one of the reasons they want to implement the respawn together mechanic, and I think that might not be a bad thing. Um, Again, you really do have to watch the replay and watch it specifically in third person to kind of see from a macro scale just how disadvantageous uh, the opposite team had it. Not through anybody's skill difference, but just specifically because somebody was typing and they didn't leave spawn at the same time. I think if we actually did have a fair fight and have had two people simultaneously, two teams, I mean, five clash for the point, I think this would have been a much different game, and I don't think this can really be considered a fair game because of that. Now, before I go on to the next point, I do want to say that I like the idea that Hanzo's going with here. Obviously, the main route was highly contested and very occupied by the enemy, so he took an off angle. I very much like that. I even think I anticipated somebody might try something like that, but unfortunately, it was already too late. They handicapped themselves in the beginning by not leading as a team, and from a positioning standpoint, they were at a disadvantage every step of the way. I just don't think it was a fair game because of that. And unfortunately, we see the same thing happen here. I don't think it's worth making as much commentary on it because it's just the same concepts again and again. But we'll easily see it here again. Unfortunately, they don't leave spawn at the same time, and they engage a bit poorly when they're already at a disadvantage. And really, that's really all I wanted to show. Positioning matters. Grouping up really does make a difference, and it's so difficult to really see how it all comes together from your first person perspective.
2, 1. Round 2. Capture the objective.
So again, they're leaving spawn, but so somebody's typing, somebody's AFK, I don't know what's going on, but only the supports and one DPS have gone forward here, and the fact that they haven't waited for the rest of their team before going in is now going to cost them. Now, of course, we also are ahead here. Sombra and myself, being higher mobility than the rest of our team, have the opportunity to engage first. Now, as you can tell, we've basically crossed more distance across the map than they have, and we're essentially going to cause the line of territory separation to lie here. And now this is where the clashing line will be, where we have two DPS who are about to engage on one support, followed by a support and the DPS coming in close by. But unfortunately, because if we again apply the 50-50 principle, our team had more resources readily available, and they're taking essentially a 5v3 with two players unavailable here, and unfortunately this causes an immediate stagger. In the new spawn together, they would probably all spawn together. The tank should have backed off, and if the tank had backed off here, they would have been able to regroup with the rest of the team. Unfortunately, that never happened, and it doesn't improve from here for this team, unfortunately. And we can tell purely from a positional standpoint that this was very bad for them. Now, this is now where I get to be the exception here, and I actually died here by the exact same principle that they're losing. I left the safe formation of my group, and I went into a danger zone, and I engaged 1v4. Now, I didn't know it was a 1v4 at the time, but again, with hindsight and seeing it from above, you can clearly tell that was a bad move. I didn't know just how bad of a move it was, and I paid for it. I I stepped out of formation, which is this blob here with this kind of extended line here, because Sombra is kind of free to poke around and do her thing. And she really is very strong for causing this kind of positional mishap in enemy teams. And I think in the lower ranks, she is going to continue to be a beast because of that. And unfortunately, looking at it from a positional standpoint now, they're behind. Sombra gets to do what she likes here, and she does draw the attention of one support here. And the tank was of course still unavailable from the fight before. And again, this three-man party here engages on our three-man party. But even from a positional standpoint, we can tell that they are far less clumped together. The two supports here are really on the tank, and they're also engaging with less than optimal health, while the rest of the team here is full HP. So again, from a purely 50-50 standpoint, they are bound to lose because they have less resources available than the team they're engaging on. And as we will see, there will be some trading going on here, but eventually they don't make it here, and obviously they lose one, we lose one, and eventually I regroup, the Sombra regroups, and now the tide has been turned around completely, and it was a 2v3 and eventually a 1v4, and they get the chance to regroup again, but unfortunately it goes wrong again, and I think the tank has already just given up here. Either that or they're typing furiously or ferociously is what I meant to say, but the problem of them not leaving spawn together continues. And again, from above it becomes really obvious that we really control this area now. They need to push back against us, and if this had been a payload map, you know that it takes a minute or two, sometimes even three, but eventually you will out-resource them because your spawn is closer, you respawn quicker, you have less distance to travel to the fight, and this unfortunately doesn't happen on this kind of map because the map is smaller, it's more dynamic, and unfortunately, by sheer coincidence of how they died and respawned, they're not giving themselves the best opportunity to come back from this. I'm pretty sure I stopped playing at this point because I'm really confused, but yeah, unfortunately, this happens a lot at our level. I think we can stop this by respawning together in base and waiting for everyone in base. I do know that it's very common in other maps, which are built to be a bit larger, for the map to give us spots to regroup at different spots. So what most people do, especially if you compare it to Lijiang Tower or Oasis actually, let's compare it to Oasis, the one with the tower in the middle. That's a little hidey spot. I think it's I don't remember what it's called. Anyway, the point is there's a couple of points before you even get to have a look at the objective where there's walls that trick you into stopping. Those are natural group up points. This map has fewer of them, so I think the smarter thing is indeed to think about leaving spawn together, and I think the developer team also knows that there's only two ways they can do this. Either we have to learn to leave spawn together and regroup better, which is of course the ideal situation, or you force it into the game mechanically. And I think this example actually shows, in my opinion at least, why they think such a thing might be necessary. It's really easy for Staggerfests to begin if you don't start out the game optimally with the most amount of resources available. And I didn't want to show this game because I think we did better. My point is more that we never had a shot at a proper game together, and this was why. Somebody was AFK, somebody typed, and unfortunately it wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't a fair team fight, and that's a shame. I think for the quality of all of our games, small things like this, we can adjust, and it will make such a huge difference. And of course, I'm not one to preach. I essentially live in bronze to gold, but I think quality of games can happen everywhere. It's not a high level exclusive thing. And I highly encourage watching more games from a top down perspective, because I have often said that I think Overwatch unintentionally lies about things sometimes, and I think a part of that is being first person. We just don't get to see the full picture, and we don't get to see how some of the mechanics interact with one another. But yeah, that was my take on some of the fundamentals of grouping up, and I think personally this game was a really good example of the importance and the strength of grouping up early on and often. Otherwise, you just end up losing a resource match, and it just feels bad. And the rolling that doesn't seem to stop. So, you know, thanks for letting me know if you thought this was useful. Look after yourselves, everyone, and have a really good day.